Leading up to the release of Crisis on Infinite Earths, the crossover event was getting a lot of comparison to Avengers Endgame, being the conclusion to the universe, being the conclusion to the saga. That also came out in 2019. As we saw the first 3 episodes, it became pretty clear that those episodes are Infinity War, especially with the cliffhanger of Part 3 being very similar to the cliffhanger of Infinity War, while Parts 4 and 5 are the endgame of the Arrowverse. So yeah, those are Infinity War and Endgame, but what about the rest of the MCU movies? Thinking about this, it just made me think, what about those other movies? What about the other 21 movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? What would be the Arrowverse equivalents or counterparts to all of those movies? So with that in mind, I made a list. I went over every single movie in the MCU, and I think I determined which seasons in the Arrowverse or crossover events are the equivalents or counterparts to those movies. Now, this is only counting not really the only the main Arrowverse shows, because it will be Arrow, The Flash, Supergirl, Legends of Tomorrow, and Batwoman, but also Constantine, Black Lightning, Freedom Fighters, The Ray, and Vixen, while all the other Arrowverse shows, which are basically Arrowverse adjacent, just didn't fit into the MCU at all. With that in mind, let's begin with the beginning of the MCU, Iron Man, and it's pretty clear what that would be. The pretty clear Arrowverse counterpart to Iron Man would be Arrow Season 1 for actually a lot of reasons. Arrow Season 1 obviously started the universe, and not counting the retroactively added things, was the first thing in the universe, and even went a step further than Iron Man being the namesake of the universe. But there are other things. The main hero is a billionaire who gets stranded in this place, learns to be a better person, and becomes a hero, which was because of the villain, who is Obadiah Stane and Malcolm Merlyn, who is either a trusted friend and business partner in Iron Man's sake, or in Arrow's sake, a trusted friend's father, as well as his father's business partner. I think the similarities are certainly there, and Arrow Season 1 is definitely the Arrowverse counterpart of Iron Man. The Incredible Hulk is the black sheep of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or at least it's easily the most forgotten, considering the main character was recast for later movies, and the movies basically, you don't need to watch it for the larger saga, it really is forgotten. Now, the recasting wouldn't be there for the counterpart, but the fact that it only has one outing, and also the main hero would later more appear in other franchises, like for Hulk, it would be the Avengers and Thor. I think the counterpart to the Incredible Hulk would easily be Constantine Season 1, a show with only one season, with the main hero, Constantine, later appearing more in other shows like Legends of Tomorrow, even a little bit on Arrow, but also in Crisis on Infinite Earths. So Constantine Season 1 is the Arrowverse counterpart to the Incredible Hulk. Because Iron Man 1 is Arrow Season 1, Iron Man 2 has to be a sequel to Arrow, or a season of Arrow, and you can probably tell since there are only 3 Iron Man movies, there will be a lot of seasons from Arrow that are completely cut out. With that in mind, even though it is just the next season, I still think Arrow Season 2 should be one of the seasons that remains, because it is a second installment which fits Iron Man 2. There are some parallels, like the villain being motivated by revenge, and the main sidekick from the comics, War Machine, and Roy Harper, who later got the name Arsenal, would become heroes in this season. There aren't really that many parallels, but I think there are enough for Iron Man 2's counterpart to be Arrow Season 2. I think the equivalent to Thor is pretty obviously The Flash, because of a couple of reasons. The reasons that will become more evident with the second and third movies that have a lot more similarities to their counterparts than you might have expected, but for Thor being The Flash Season 1, The Flash Season 1 was set up by Arrow Season 2, with its equivalent being Iron Man Season 2, which had an end credit scene that set up Thor. There's also the fact that the main hero has lightning abilities, and the main villain, Loki and Reverse Flash, are some of, if not the most beloved villains in the whole universe. Loki's really just behind Thanos, and for Reverse Flash, he's probably right up there as the most beloved villain. With that in mind, I do think that the Thor and the Flash franchises do fit fairly well, and they're going to fit even more with the second and third installments of Thor. The final pre-Avengers movie in Phase 1 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is Captain America: The First Avenger, which is the first movie of what is definitely the best trilogy in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, not counting Avengers since that's a quadrilogy, and I don't think a lot of people would disagree with that. However, there is one TV show in the Arrowverse that is drastically worse than anything from the Captain America trilogy, even on Arrowverse standards, but it is a movie that is a TV show that fits the placement and the chronology of release, but also stars a hero wearing a blue costume with a letter on it that has blonde hair, and that would be Supergirl Season 1, which is the Arrowverse counterpart to Captain America: The First Avenger. Other than those two things, the placement and the chronology of release, and the main hero having that blue costume with the letter and blonde hair, there's really no similarities here whatsoever, and the quality is drastically different, but I think this is going to be the best counterpart. And finally, we get to the Avengers, the counterpart of which will not be a season, it's going to be a crossover event like the rest of the Avengers movies. And while the first two are obviously there, you got Flash vs. Arrow, the first one, and also Heroes Join Forces, those are more team-ups than Justice Leagues, and I think the counterpart to the Avengers has to be a Justice League, so I think that the counterpart to the Avengers should be Invasion. Invasion is a crossover event following an alien invasion, where the Justice League all team up against the Dominators. Avengers is a movie about an alien invasion where the Avengers all team up against the Chitauri, and I think the parallels are certainly there, as the Avengers and the Justice League are all like their counterparts. Now, obviously, because the Flash season 2 and also the Legends haven't happened yet, those things wouldn't really be a part of this version of Invasion, but still, I think that the Invasion crossover is certainly the counterpart to the Avengers. Moving on to Phase 2, we have Iron Man 3, and with its Arrowverse counterpart, we're going back to Arrow, but we're skipping Season 3 and 4, which are seasons that literally didn't need to happen whatsoever, but also since there are only 3 Iron Man movies, we're gonna have to slim down Arrow. Instead of Season 3 and 4, we're skipping right to Season 5, which is not only the next good season of Arrow, but also it's the season that comes out right after Invasion, or at least most of it comes out right after Invasion. The first 7 episodes do come out right before, but that is something that could easily be rectified. There's also the fact that both of these installments end with this explosive ending. Iron Man blows up all his suits, Arrow has the Lian Yu explosion, and the main villain is motivated by revenge for something the main hero did in a flashback, so the similarities are certainly there, but you might be thinking, what about the resolution to the Lian Yu explosion? Well, I think that's going to happen in this thing would be Avengers Age of Ultron, or the equivalent to that, but there will be more Arrow, and I'll get back to that when I do. Thor: The Dark World is very obviously The Flash Season 2, and the similarities are very much there, not only because the franchise is connected now in this video, but also, if you take the title The Dark World, it could honestly be a subtitle for The Flash Season 2, The Flash: The Dark World, as it very heavily focuses on Earth 2, which in a lot of ways is a dark parallel of Earth 1, so it's The Dark World. There's also the fact that the villains are very similar. They're both hellbent on either destroying the universe for Malekith, or all but one universe for Zoom. Another thing is that one of their parents dies, Frigga for Thor, and Henry Allen for The Flash. I think that The Flash Season 2 is very obviously Thor: The Dark World. One change I would make for The Flash Season 2 is that he doesn't ever save his mother and he doesn't create Flashpoint. Since I'm never going to get to The Flash Season 3 here, that's never going to happen in this video, so I guess in this version of the Arrowverse, that didn't happen, or at least didn't happen yet, and that could certainly happen in the future. But anyway, that doesn't really matter. Let's move on to Captain America: The Winter Soldier. This one is pretty simple. Captain America: The Winter Soldier is a sequel to Captain America: The First Avenger, so its counterpart would be a sequel to Supergirl Season 1, so Supergirl Season 2. Now, I think that one parallel you can say is that these installments introduce a sidekick of sorts, the Falcon, and while he shouldn't be a sidekick, Superman, who both of them are getting half of a spin-off show. The Falcon is getting a spin-off show with the Winter Soldier, and Superman is getting a spin-off show with Lois, so I guess the parallel is there, but other than that, these shows and movies are very different in quality and also just what they are, but either way, they I guess are the counterparts. Guardians of the Galaxy was the basically the sci-fi introduction to the Marvel Cinematic Universe with space. Similarly, Legends of Tomorrow I think would be the same thing. It is different since they don't really go to space very often. They are obviously more focused on time travel, but considering these two installments are focused on a sci-fi focused team comprised of heroes and criminals who work together to stop a worldwide threat of sorts, Legends of Tomorrow Season 1 I think is pretty obviously the counterpart to Guardians of the Galaxy, and I guess now these franchises are linked. Getting back to the crossover events, I think Avengers Age of Ultron would certainly be Crisis on Earth X, mainly because it is the direct sequel to Invasion, as Age of Ultron is a direct sequel to the Avengers, so I think that fits very well, but also you can say that the villains of Crisis on Earth X, especially Dark Arrow and Overgirl and Reverse Flash, are dark parallels of the main heroes of the Trinity, while Ultron is a dark parallel of Iron Man. There's also Metallo, who is a robot that they fight in this crossover event, so I think honestly out of all the crossovers, Crisis on Earth X fits Age of Ultron the best, but like I said earlier, since Arrow Season 5 was the last time we saw this version of Green Arrow in this universe, I would think that the Lian Yu explosion is resolved in this movie right at the beginning, but then you go into Crisis on Earth X. So the first movie to come out after Age of Ultron was Ant-Man, while the first new TV show to come out after Crisis on Earth X was Freedom Fighters The Ray. This does mean that Ant-Man gets kind of a bad deal here, since Freedom Fighters The Ray is barely connected to the Arrowverse. It's barely even canon at all, especially in Season 2. I'll get to that later with Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I'll talk about what I would change there. However, for now, I think Freedom Fighters The Ray, I guess, fits Ant-Man the most, even though, I mean, the similarities are really not there very much. Up until this point, the counterparts of the Captain America trilogy have been Supergirl, but I think that changes here. Captain America Civil War is a Captain America movie first and foremost, but it is also an Avengers movie, so that gives us the opportunity to make it a crossover event, and because of that, I think it should be Elseworlds. Now, the similarities are not really there that much. There's not really very much fighting between the heroes, which is the main focus of Civil War. I mean, there is a little fight between Flash and Green Arrow. I guess Superman is evil for a little bit, or at least a version of Superman is evil, but other than that, there really isn't very many similarities. But because it does set up Crisis on Infinite Earths and Civil War sets up Infinity War, and also because there's really no other place to put Elseworlds, I think this would be the best place for the crossover event, and the counterpart to Civil War would be Elseworlds. Doctor Strange, just like Ant-Man, is going to be one of the CW seed shows, and it's going to be Vixen, which does kind of suck, since Vixen, like Freedom Fighters The Ray, it doesn't really matter for the Arrowverse, but there's a lot more franchises in the MCU spread out, or the movies are spread out between a lot more franchises than the main shows of the Arrowverse, so it does kind of have to be spread out here as well, and the similarities here really only range from magic to really nothing else, and that's going to be the main thing. These shows focus a lot on magic, as Vixen gets her powers from a magical totem, and Doctor Strange is a sorcerer, so that's the counterparts, the similarities are there, but I think it's probably one of the least similar movies and TV shows in the entire video, but, you know, it has to be something. So now we get the sequel to Guardians of the Galaxy, which was, like I said earlier, connected to Legends of Tomorrow, or the counterpart was Legends of Tomorrow Season 1. This one would be Legends of Tomorrow Season 2, which is really the only other season of Legends of Tomorrow that I think matters whatsoever, and it's certainly my favorite season, but also there's one major similarity, or at least it's a similarity with these installments, introducing previous hero teams that predate the hero teams that these movies or TV shows focus on, the OG Guardians, or the Ravagers for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and the JSA for Legend of Tomorrow Season 2. One big change, I would say, is that Amaya Jiwei wouldn't be a part of the season whatsoever, since Vixen Season 1 literally just came out on this version of the Arrowverse, and that doesn't really matter to me. I mean, Amaya Jiwei doesn't really matter, I think, in Legend of Tomorrow Season 2 for the most part. It's more in Season 3, but with that in mind, I do think that our Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 would be Legend of Tomorrow Season 2. So Iron Man ended with Iron Man 3, however, with there only being 3 Iron Man movies, you have to put more seasons of Arrow somewhere, since there are at least 4 seasons of Arrow, 1, 2, 5, and 8, that are great, but also they are important, especially Arrow Season 8. It's a season that absolutely has to exist before the Crisis. Because of that, I'm going to be using Spider-Man Homecoming, a movie with a strong connection to Iron Man. I mean, he even appears to, instead of a new franchise, I'm going to give it Arrow Season 8. When it comes to its sequel, I'll get to that later, but for now, I think Spider-Man Homecoming would be Arrow Season 8, which does mean that Season 6 and 7 either happen off screen or not at all, like Season 3 and 4. So it's been a while, but we are back to Thor with Thor Ragnarok, which would very obviously be a season of The Flash, but for the sake of this franchise, since this is right before Infinity War, I mean, this movie leads directly into Infinity War, this absolutely has to skip Season 3, skip Season 4, and skip Season 5, and this is The Flash Season 6A, obviously because of the connection between Thor and Flash, but also it leads directly into Infinity War / Crisis. But another thing is that the villain has a very strong connection to the concept of death. Hela is the goddess of death, and Bloodwork is absolutely obsessed with avoiding his own death, and that leads him down a path of insanity. Again, this does mean that Season 3, 4, and 5 either happen off screen or not at all, but that's fine because, like Arrow, those are seasons that either don't matter or I don't really like them as much, so because of that, they have to be sacrificed for the sake of this video, and The Flash Season 6A, which is confirmed as its own separate season from The Flash Season 6B, would be the counterpart for Ragnarok. Now for Black Panther, I mean, do I really have to say what the counterpart would be? I guess I have to say this season, but it's pretty clear that the show would be Black Lightning because they're the first movie or TV show in these universes, even multiverses, to focus on black characters, so I definitely think that the similarities are there. I mean, they both even start with the word black, but in terms of the season, I think Black Lightning should honestly skip Season 1 and skip Season 2 and go directly into Season 3 for Black Panther, considering Black Panther is not an origin story whatsoever. Even though Black Lightning wasn't either, it was a semblance of an origin story a little bit, but I think that it would work better for Season 3 since Black Panther comes out right before Infinity War, and Season 3 leads directly into Crisis on Infinite Earths. With that in mind, I think that Black Panther would be Black Lightning Season 3. The big conclusion to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the big conclusion to the Arrowverse would obviously be Avengers Infinity War and Crisis on Infinite Earths A, which is the first 3 parts. It is the big conclusion, but also it ends on an insane cliffhanger, which is something that I mentioned earlier, so I'm not really going to go into it more. And we get to Endgame, it's obviously going to be parts 4 and 5 of the Crisis. So you would think that since Ant-Man is Freedom Fighters The Race Season 1, Ant-Man and the Wasp would be Freedom Fighters The Race Season 2, but a lot more so than Season 1. Season 2 is absolutely so disconnected from the Arrowverse's canon that I don't consider it to be canon, and instead of Season 2, which never happened, I will give it Crisis on Infinite Earths Giant Issue 1, which had a storyline that he wasn't the main character, but it did focus on the Ray, and I guess in this version he would have been the main character of that story. It's a story that takes place during Part 2 of Crisis on Infinite Earths, and the Ray does have a big role, or a big enough role, even though he does die in Part 1. I think he was saved by Harbinger or something. I haven't read the comic because it's really impossible. I don't live in America, and there are no Walmarts here, and it's not online anywhere, but I think from what I could see, Crisis on Infinite Earths Giant Issue 1 would be the best replacement, or the best counterpart, for Ant-Man and the Wasp. The counterpart to Captain Marvel is very obviously Batwoman Season 1. These movies/TV shows, these installments are by far the most controversial installments that these universes have ever released. They are both female-led, which is the first one for the MCU, but not the first one for the Arrowverse by a long shot, since both Supergirl and Legends of Tomorrow After Season 2 are led by women, so I guess you can't really say that that similarity means very much, but for the controversy it's there, for the fact that it comes out so close before the endgame, or at least before the final conclusion, it certainly is there as well, and it's pretty clear that Captain Marvel and Batwoman Season 1 are counterparts. And finally, we get to Avengers Endgame, which I established earlier the counterpart would be parts 4 and 5 of Crisis on Infinite Earths, not only because it's the final conclusion, but also it's basically repairing what the main villain did. The main villain, Thanos and the Anti-Monitor, did what they wanted to do, they succeeded, but now it seems like also through some time travel plot, they not only have to stop him, but also they have to fix what the villain did, and in the end, the Iron Man/Green Arrow will sacrifice his life to save the world, or the multiverse, so that is Avengers Endgame. Aside from Endgame, there is one movie currently released in the MCU, and that's Spider-Man Far From Home, basically the epilogue to the Infinity Saga, and I think the best fit there, I would say Green Arrow and the Canaries, but I think I'll save that for the next Spider-Man movie since it comes out a lot later. But for Spider-Man Far From Home, honestly, it's just going to be the series finale of Arrow. Arrow Season 8, Episode 10 will, I think, be the counterpart to Spider-Man Far From Home, since Spider-Man took over Iron Man as the Green Arrow, or the Arrow counterpart of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and Spider-Man Far From Home is the epilogue. You can say that the Arrow Season 8 finale would also be the epilogue to the Crisis, so I do think Spider-Man Far From Home is Arrow Season 8, Episode 10, just one episode, which actually I heard is 2 hours long, so that fits. With that in mind, this right here, and I probably will put a picture up here just to show all of the things that made it into this version of the Arrowverse, is what the Arrowverse would have looked like with the structure of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which honestly, I think it looks way better. It basically trims away all the fat of especially Arrow, the Flash, and Legends of Tomorrow, but also Supergirl, and even the crossovers, like Heroes Join Forces, not something that ever needed to exist, and while there are some sacrifices that needed to be made, the biggest ones probably are Flash vs. Arrow and the Arrow Season 7 prison storyline. Those are the best things that didn't make it into this, because there was nothing for the Marvel Cinematic Universe that would work as the counterpart to that, but even still, I think this is a much better looking Arrowverse, and it would be a great Crisis Saga as the equivalent to the Infinity Saga of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but there are a lot of Marvel Cinematic Universe movies coming forward, or coming in the next couple of years, and also TV shows, so maybe if this video does well, I'll make updated videos whenever those movies come out. With that in mind, however, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.